Hello, my name is Lewis and this is the Everyday Elite Mobility Manual. Bit about me first, I've been in the fitness industry for just under 7 years now. I've run my own coaching business and I have a history of high-level rugby and competing in multiple mixed martial arts. In this video manual, I'm going to share with you everything that I know about mobility, why it's important, some common misconceptions about mobility, and then show you a few routines so you can best improve your own. Mobility is defined as the ability to move a joint through its full range of motion with control. A common misconception that people make about mobility is that it's the same as flexibility, which is the ability to move and stretch a muscle into a certain range. It's important to distinguish the two, because mobility requires something that flexibility doesn't, and that's strength. It's all well and good being able to train your body to get into a certain range, but if you don't have strength in that range, it's not going to benefit your everyday life. Flexibility, however, is really important when it comes to handling tight muscles, DOMs, and temporary pain relief. When we're younger, our bodies are essentially like rubber bands, and we're allowed to do and get away with basically anything. However, as we get older, those joints and connective tissues slowly get stiffer and less elastic. This slowly makes us less able to do the stuff that we used to, and in some extreme cases can cause chronic pain. This is made especially worse when you consider things like desk jobs and sedentary lifestyles are becoming increasingly more common. There is a direct correlation in mortality rates between adults who have some kind of mobility issue and are less active versus those who are fit, healthy, and more active. So yes, simply by moving around and being more physically active, in theory, you are less susceptible to mobility issues. However, I know that there's a fair few of you who are still quite physically active and develop some mobility issues. Now that we've covered the basics of mobility, I'm going to take you through some stretches and routines for some of the most common questions I personally get as a coach. That being how to best warm up for lifting, how to best warm up for running, some tips and stretches for shoulder pain, some tips and stretches for knee pain, and some tips and stretches for back pain. Before getting into it, there's some important things I would like you to know. Number one, strength training through a full range of motion is the best thing that you can do for your body's mobility. Taking your joints and muscles through their full range of motion while under load is the best way you can increase strength within that range. This is why some of the top bodybuilders in the world are the most mobile people you'll ever see, which leads to number two. Number two, mobility routines are there to supplement your other training sessions, not completely take over. Because of a mix of popular influencers and just general fear of getting injured, people are spending way too much time in the gym just doing mobility routines. If you're someone who's only got 30 to 45 minutes to spend in the gym, but take 20 to 25 minutes of stretching to get started, then you're missing the point. Number three, these routines are not going to cure or completely prevent any long-lasting chronic pain that you might have. Freak accidents happen, and if you're someone who suffers from any tendon, ligament, muscular, or even bone damage, then I seriously suggest that you consult your doctor. Your warm-up before lifting in the gym should be short and sweet. Remember, our primary goal here is to raise the heart rate and prime the body for movement. Before lifting in the gym, I would suggest that you spend no more than 5 minutes on a piece of cardio equipment, working at around about a 5 or 6 out of 10 in intensity. I want you to think about this like warming up your car on a cold winter's day. Yes, you could drive without warming it up, but it's going to be a bit of a nightmare. Personally, I like to go on the row machine, an air bike, or just a standard bike erg before I start my lifting session. After your 5 minutes of cardio, you want to jump into 2 or 3 warm-up sets of whatever primary lift you've got first. Let's take back squats, for example. Warm-up sets should be at around 50 to 60% of your top working set. Warm-up sets are super important because not only are they going to prime your muscles for the intended lift, but they're also going to prime your CNS or central nervous system. Doing this is also going to give you a good idea of how your body is feeling and how you're going to perform during that lift. Any warm-up before running follows the same principles, with the main objective being to raise the body's heart rate. This is the routine I like to use personally to warm up and oil up my joints before a run. Back pain, or more specifically lower back pain, is probably the most common issue that I get with clients coming in, especially of those who work desk jobs. Now, I'm going to take you through a routine that should help temporarily relieve some pain in your lower back. So the first stretch that we're going to go ahead and do is the knee to chest stretch. So we're just going to lie down on the mats here, and all that you're going to do is lift up whichever knee you want to go first to your chest, and you're going to clasp both hands together around that knee and just hug into your chest. You're going to hold that for around about 30 to 45 seconds before then switching. Now, what this is going to do for you, this is not only going to stretch a little bit of your hamstring, but it's also going to give your glute or your bum a nice stretch. And what we tend to find is that with really tight glutes and really tight hamstrings, it can actually cause lower back pain. So the second stretch that we're going to do right off the bat of that is a hamstring stretch. So very similar, you're going to bring one leg up, you're going to use both hands to clasp the back of your leg, and you're just going to try and pull it as far back as you can. And this is going to target more the hamstrings. You're going to hold that for 30 to 45 seconds before then switching. Again, holding that for 30 to 45 seconds, trying to pull it back as far as you can. Now, one thing I should note, if you feel any pain while doing this, just relax it a little bit. We're trying to stretch and challenge the muscle, not give it any more pain. And put it down. The next stretch that we're going to do is called the iron cross, and it's one of my favorites. We're going to lie back down on the mat and put our arms as if we're doing a letter T. From here, we bring our knees into our chest, keeping them both together. And what I'm going to do from here, I'm going to bring my knees down to one side of my body, and I'm going to look off to the other side. So if I bring my knees down to the left side, I'm going to turn my head to the right. I'm going to pause for a split second before I then come back up, bring my knees to the right, and rotate my head to the left. Now I'm going to do this for 10 reps on each side. And one really important thing to stress while I'm doing this is to keep my shoulders as flat on the mat as possible. And the idea is that we're moving this lumbar spine around, okay? Really getting the rotation to the mid to lower back end of the spine. Again, 10 reps on each side before you pause and come back up. While we're in this position of the iron cross, we can move straight onto the next stretch, and that's going to be thoracic rotations. Now we're going to do the exact same setup as the iron cross by moving our knees to one side, but now instead of looking across to the other side, we're actually going to have our far hand meet our hand where the knees are, like so. Big stretch, try and bring your shoulder down to the mat and come and meet that hand. Now the idea of this stretch is that we're moving the thoracic spine, so that mid spine, a little bit more than we would while we're doing the iron cross. You want to do 10 on one side, bring the knees up and across, before we then do 10 on the other side. And again, after each rep, you can give a slight pause to really feel the stretch before coming back again. The next stretch we're going to cover is commonly called the world's best stretch. It's for good reason. It's a pretty good stretch. To do this stretch, we're going to come into a high plank position. From here, I'm going to bring one of my feet up to meet one of my hands. In this case, it's going to be the left foot and left hand, like so. From this position, I want to bring my left hand, I want to feed it through my right arm, so the opposite arm, before then coming up, rotating and exposing my chest to the ceiling. I then repeat the process. I feed the arm through as far as I can before exposing as much of my chest to the ceiling as possible. You want to do around about 10 reps on each side. I'm going to speed up the process for you before coming down and repeating the same movements on the other side. What you might find is with this stretch is that you feel a stretch in your groin, but the entire idea of it, similar to the ones previous, is that I'm rotating my spine. Now the final stretch I've got for you for the lower back is pretty advanced. If you can't do the stretch yet, that's absolutely fine. You can always build to it. This is called the scorpion stretch, and in my opinion, it's probably one of the best stretches you can do for the lower back. To do this, what we're going to do is we're going to lie belly down on the mat. We're going to put our arms out like a T shape. From here, I'm going to bring one of my feet to meet the opposite hand. While I'm doing this, I'm going to try and keep my shoulders as flat on the mat as possible. I'm going to show you now. Left foot comes up, stretches across to meet my right hand. And I want to do this continuously for around about 10 reps on each side. Now, if you are just beginning, you might find that you can only bring your foot to a low down position. That's absolutely fine. But if you're a bit more advanced, you can really try and get it to meet your hand. You're going to switch and do the same on the other side. And if you're someone who suffers from one side of your back being a little bit tighter than the other side, this is going to be a really good stretch for you. Like I said, a little bit more advanced, but you can always progress and work to it. The next series of stretches I'm going to be giving you is for the shoulder joint. Now, one of the biggest issues I see with people when they come to me with any kind of shoulder impingement, tightness, or just general weakness in the shoulders is an inability to get their arms into this overhead position. And this can really affect you when you're trying to do exercises like the dumbbell seated shoulder press or the military press. This can be down to just a general tightness in the area or a weakness in the area. First stretch I'm going to be showing you is a stretch called the capsule stretch, and this is really going to help free up some space in the lat area just behind the rear delt here, which is really, really important when it comes to shoulder mobility. So to do the stretch, we're going to come down onto our elbows, right? And whichever shoulder is the most tight is the one you're going to start with. We're going to use our forearm to grab the side that is most tight. And what we're going to do here, we're just going to hold this in place and we're going to sit back on our feet. And you really want to be feeling the stretch across that lat area. And just hold it for around about 20 to 30 seconds and just try and get as low as you can. And after you've done one side, you're going to come back up, switch arms, and really try and stretch that side as well. And again, the whole idea is we're trying to bring our bum as close to our feet as possible. Another really important aspect is that we are feeling this down the armpit area, so around about where our lat is. If you start feeling this at the top of your shoulder, what I'd suggest doing is bringing your arm up just a little bit higher before you then come into this stretch, and then you should really feel it there. Our next stretch is going to really help us get into that overhead position, and you're going to need two pieces of equipment in order to do it. The first piece of equipment is going to be any kind of wooden dowel or long pole. I've seen people do this with golf clubs, I've seen people do this with tennis rackets if you've got one big enough, but really anything that you can have a nice wide grip with. I've also seen people do it with bands, so if you've got a set of bands at home, you can absolutely do this with them as well. The second piece of equipment is going to be any kind of yoga ball, box, medicine ball, really anything that you can elevate yourself on. And to do this exercise, we're going to bring our shoulder blades up onto the ball. Now, something that's really important here is to not lift my hips up alongside of this, okay? So try and keep your hips nice and low to the floor. We're only trying to elevate this upper body. You're going to take a nice wide grip with the dowel, and you're going to try and bring your arms slowly into this overhead position. Now, a lot of you will not be able to get as far back as me, and that is absolutely fine. If you can only get to this position, that's great. Work at this position. But what we're trying to do is when you find a range where you can feel the stretch, you just want to hold it there for around about 5 to 10 seconds before coming back and then repeating the process. Come back to a point where you feel the stretch. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and come back over. And you want to do this for around about 10 reps. The last stretch we're going to do for your shoulders is to help your shoulders' ability to internally rotate. And what we're going to do is we're going to come into this position. Imagine you're in a catalog, all right? And you want to come in this position, tricep on the floor, and you bring your hand that the tight shoulder is on nice and high in the air. From here, you're going to use your opposite hand to grip either the fist or the wrist, and you're going to try and rotate that shoulder inward. And just come as far as you can. Again, we're not looking for pain here, we're looking for a stretch before you then come back up. Okay, so again, have it probably in line with your face. Grip, rotate in, see how far you can come without experiencing any pain, and bring yourself up again. One more, bring it down, feel the stretch, hold it just for a little bit, and bring it back up again. Again, we're going to be aiming for around about 10 reps on each side. Now, knee pain is just a little bit trickier. Because of the way the knee is situated in the leg, it doesn't really get a lot of fluid going to it unless you move it first. And another thing to note is that knee pain can be caused for a load of different reasons, from bone, muscular, ligament, tendon, and cartilage damage. If you're someone who suffers from any kind of knee injury, please go see your doctor first. And I can say that from experience. What's important to know is that the movement of the knee is mainly influenced by two of the muscle groups, that being your quads and your hamstrings. Your quads have influence over knee extension, while your hamstrings have influence over knee flexion. So it's really important to increase the strength of both of these muscle groups in order to have a well-functioning knee. This also means that if you don't have good strength in either your quads or your hamstrings, it can actually aggravate any kind of knee pain that you have further. So something that I suggest for everybody who has some kind of knee pain is when they're doing their initial gym warm-up, whether it's before lifting or whether it's before running, to do some sets of leg extensions or hamstring curls. This is to really try and fire up and get a good pump on the quad or the hamstring muscle, and that should really help you out with any kind of knee pain that you've got. Getting into some knee mobility exercises, one of the best stretches that you can do for knee mobility is the half kneeling lunge. What we're going to do here is we're going to bring one knee down to the floor while the other leg comes situated up to here. From here, we're going to really try and lunge as deep as we can. And the idea is we're trying to push the knee as far past the toes as possible. Now, not only is this getting the knee in a really stretched position, but it's also working our ankle mobility. And these two things play part and parcel when it comes to getting into a deep squat. If you've got poor knee mobility, if you've got poor ankle mobility, you're not going to be able to get into a deep squat. Another muscle that this is working quite well is the hip flexor. As you can see, I'm really stretched out here. You want to hold this stretch for around about 30 to 60 seconds before you then come up and switch legs. Bringing the other one up and lunging as far as you can. You can see I'm a little bit tighter on this side than I was the other side. Another good way to look at this is trying to bring your hamstring as close to your calf as possible. Again, hold it for around about 30 to 60 seconds before coming back up. From this position, we can actually go straight into our next stretch, which is the half split. Now, this is going to help stretch out our hamstrings. You find people who can barely extend their knee, and that's because they've got really poor hamstring mobility, and the hamstrings will be that tight that's pulling on the knee and not allowing your leg to fully straighten. We're going to come back into this kneeling position. This time, you're going to put that lead foot just a little bit further. From here, we're going to bring our hands to the floor, and we're going to extend our leg as much as we can. You can sit back a little bit on the other leg. Toes are going to point as far up to the ceiling as possible, and keeping this leg as straight as you can, you're going to try and bring yourself nice and low. Now, in the past, I promise you, I used to bring my forehead to my knee, but I can't do that. You want to hold this for around about 30 to 60 seconds before then coming up, bringing this leg back, and then going for the opposite side. Again, getting as far forward as you can, bring them toes up to the ceiling, and just start slowly bringing yourself down. Hold that 30 to 60 seconds before bringing yourself back up. Now, to progress the stretch, obviously the main thing that you want to be doing is maintaining that straight leg, and you want to slowly bring your head down to meet that knee. The last exercise I'm going to tell you about in order to help knee pain is actually an isometric exercise. Now, if you're unfamiliar with isometrics, if we think about the two movements that come together in a lift, that being the concentric and eccentric, let's take the bench press for example. The concentric is when we're pushing the barbell or dumbbells away from us when we're exerting force, and the eccentric is when we're bringing it back down. An isometric exercise is when we are neither doing a concentric movement or an eccentric movement, and we're just holding the same spot. The muscle is neither flexing or extending. Isometrics are super important to help develop tendon strength. And if we're talking about the knees, a lot of people I see with knee damage have really poor or weak tendons. The isometric movement that we're going to be working is something called the split stance iso hold. And what we're going to do here is we're going to come into this sort of split squat position. Now the leg I really want you to try and focus on is this lead leg here. We're going to descend until this lead leg is at around about a 90-degree angle, okay? And remember, this is an isometric, so we don't have to come up or down from here. We're just going to hold this position. I want you to hold this for around about 15 to 60 seconds, depending on how strong your legs are. You might find yourself giving away really, really early, which is fine. This is something that we're going to work on. This exercise in general is really helping to light up the quad of that lead leg. It's also forcing the tendons to work within that one range, which is really going to help increase the strength. Again, hold this from anywhere from 15 to 60 seconds before you stand up and switch legs. Now, something that you can do if this gets too easy is add weight. I like to add 2 dumbbells or even a barbell to this exercise, okay? And that's just gonna take your tendon strength from 0 to 100. That's all from me. I hope this mobility manual has helped you in some kind of way. If you wanna follow me on my social media, my Instagram handle is Lewis J. Howe. I post a lot of content like this. Take care.